started. The meeting this evening will be live streamed meeting to the public. The recording of a part of the meeting will be available on the council's website within 24 hours. We haven't got any remote participants. No, I'll go that way. There we go. Yeah, I think that's all we got on there, and then we just go through the preliminaries. Evacuation procedure. Committee room 124, council chamber, turn left, follow the green emergency exit signs to the main town hall entrance and proceed to the assembly point at St George's Square. First item is apologies for absence. I think there are some.
Yes, Chair. We've received apologies from councillors Haniff, Mead and Bridgham.
Okay. Minutes of the 20th of May and the 28th of May. You okay with those? I'll sign them. Any section 106 Local Government Finance Act? Declarations. Disclosure of interest tonight. Either call it out now or when the item's called. Urgent business. Not aware of any references from committees and other bodies. So we'll go straight on to the first application. That's agenda item 7, 2 Gloucester Road, page 14 to 53. Who's going to do this one?
It's Frank, he's online.
Oh, there is somebody online.
Yeah.
Okay, Frank, over to you.
Just to check, Chair, we're taking this one first. I thought the other one had an objector speaking.
You've got the applicant on Bolton Road, so up to you can share which one you're.
I was not aware of the objector.
No, not objector, just the applicant.
Oh, yeah, no, that's all right. No, we'll take it as it is.
Yeah.
2 Gloucester Road.
Okay, Chair, thank you for that. Just wanted to clarify. So, Chair and members, just to present to you this case. This you may have seen briefly on Gender Papers a couple of months ago, and it was pulled to have a rejig for fire safety reasons. So we're now presenting to you a case that's been looked at again. The application is located here next to A505 viaduct above Victoria Car Park. It's a proposal for a 6 to 7 storey mixed use development comprising 1 commercial unit at ground floor and 15 flats on the upper floors following demolition of the existing building. There would be 5 3-bed, 4 2-bed and 6 1-bed flats and 150 square metres of commercial space. Currently, there's just under 300 square metres of commercial space. As I said, the site is located adjacent to the town centre boundary and is accessed directly off Gloucester Road. The area is designated by the local plan as a Category B employment area. The site sits adjacent to the 505 rampways and lies on a corner junction of Gloucester Road and Bolton Road, just north of Manor Road Park. It is occupied by an unattractive 2-storey office industrial building dating from the early or mid-70s. Commercial uses appear to have ceased around 2018, with reviews on Google Maps suggesting the premises may have at times been occupied by a community church, though this may have been administrative and appears to have ceased in any case now. The site is in a highly sustainable edge of town centre. Sorry, my slides have gone out of sync. The site is in a highly sustainable edge of town centre. The immediate surroundings comprising a mix of uses, including student accommodation blocks, mixed-use commercial residential blocks, and Class E commercial uses. You'll notice the application site comprises 2/3 of a larger building, with the attached number 4 in separate ownership and outside the site. Similarly, the plot, so there's on the left there you'll see number 4, and here our site on the right is number 2. It's all one attached building, but they're 2 separate postal addresses. So the plot to the rear comprises a different address again. So here to the rear on the right, you'll see it's number 2 to 12 Bolton Road. Once used as a car body shop, and there's a permission on that site now, which we'll come to shortly. As you can see, the site is quite small, but obviously when we're actually down on the ground, it can host a 0.04 hectares of space. So before we go through the proposal, just want to make members aware of some context of what has been granted permission next door at 2 to 12 Bolton Road. Although it's not yet built, a 6-storey building containing 10 apartments and 2 commercial units, permission was given at appeal. So our site here is in the red area. This is what was approved at appeal, and that's the elevations there. If people need to see more detail, I can zoom in a bit for you on those ones. There's some CGI views showing what that development looks like on approval with our site here in front of it. And just to give you the context before we move on to what the proposal before us looks like tonight, this is what our proposal looks like in context of the approval next door. So the developers of this application have included a CGI with their CGI to show you context and heights. Okay. So now we move on to our presentation of what is proposed here. We have a 6-storey building containing 15 flats on floors 1 to 5 and a 150 square metre commercial unit at ground floor. Externally, the building will be finished in contrasting yellow and grey brickwork, which would be to frame windows, balconies and help articulate the corner. You'll note in the report the building was previously higher, but as I said at the beginning, has been reduced to address new fire safety regulations which required a second staircase when the building was higher. The building now satisfies the necessary building regs as they exist, and post Grenfell they are evolving to 2029, so this building will still comply in 2029. Officers have secured additional changes to improve communal entrances and work with the developer to make sure the flats and commercial units are accessed in a safer way, with recesses designed out and windows increased at ground floor street level to help the street feel more observed and policed. The 150 square metres of space at ground floor doesn't include waste and service store areas or substation space. It replaces the current 300 square metres, which is in a building that isn't really fit for modern use. Residential access has been configured to achieve better internal connections to the bin store and cycle parking, meaning when you come down, you can go to the bin store in your slippers and you can actually access the cycle area here without having to fight for space in the corridors. There's space within the lobby for postal services and lockers if necessary, and the whole process can happen without people going out in the rain. There are some needs for conditions to secure drop curbs outside the bin store entrances for the refuse store for the commercial here and the flats on this side here across the pavement. Moving upwards in the block, there are 3 flats per floor, resulting in 5 3-bed, 4 2-bed and 6 1-bed. Each unit will have at least 1 balcony with the 3-bed units all having 2 balconies, and in 2 of those cases, a larger roof terrace. So the larger family size units have more open space. The 3 affordable housing units to be proposed on site will be built to accessible design standards, part M42, resident dwelling requirements, with the remainder. So that's 3 of those affordable units will be built to that standard, with the remainder satisfying the M41 visitable dwelling standard. As we move up, you'll see the floor pattern more or less replicates as we move up through the building, with on the upper floor, we have the developer proposing rooftop planting and solar panels, and each unit will have an air source heat pump on their balconies to enable the development to be free from reliance on the national gas grid. I know that the scale is small here, but on the green balconies, this little oblong you see is the air source heat pump. You've already seen some of the CGIs. This is just the elevation drawings of what you've already seen there. I just want to touch on the elevation facing number 4 Gloucester Road, why that's blank, why that may come across as a bit unusual. Obviously, number 4 is developable in its own right, and to not preclude that site from making the best use of its land and to deliver flats of a similar scale and size, no windows are proposed on this elevation, rather similar to the ones over here. So the flats all work with enough light coming in other directions so that this site could be developed and that not impinge on the ability of that site to deliver a decent number of flats. In summary, of the 15 units, I said 5 are 3-bed, 4 are 2-bed, providing family-sized accommodation on the edge of centre in a car-free development well catered for by public transport and services. We have generous cycle parking and balcony spaces proposed. The applicant has agreed to sign a Section 106 legal agreement to secure that the affordable housing will be on site. there are contributions for education, highways, cultural services, and the monitoring fee. Although we're in category B employment area, and the recent approach we've seen in this area to interpreting policy LLP 14 has permitted nearby several mixed block developments. The next case tonight is another discussion about the site just around the corner from here. The council has no 5-year supply, and so the tilted balance must be applied. 15 units, of which 3 are to be affordable on site, and of which we have a higher number that are family sized, comprise a good mixed use scheme for the site, still providing some Class E use back to the plot. Along with the housing offer, the regeneration offer, the improvements to natural surveillance on the street, the tidying of this street corner and bringing activity and life to an otherwise dead part of the city outweighs the minimal identified harms, and therefore it is recommended to approve subject to conditions and a legal agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Any questions to the planning officer? Councillor Franks.
Yeah, I've just got a couple. I'm looking at the, well, I guess the first thing I'm looking at is the layout of what I think is the first floor, just above paragraph 16, where the roof terrace in the left-hand corner there seems to be exclusive for flat 1. I just want to understand, it looks to me as though it is overlooked by bedroom windows from the flats on the upper floors. Have I got that right?
Chair, would you like me to respond on that?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so that roof terrace there, I don't have the committee report in front of me, I've not got my screens, but the roof terrace at first floor level, that comes off flat 1. I see what you're talking about. That was to be an area that didn't have any use or ownership of it. It was just a space that was looked on from the stairwells. It seemed to be a waste of space, and we asked the developer to rejig flat 1's layout, as it was a 3-bed, to turn it into a usable space for, I don't know, an outdoor bar, outdoor sitting area, children's play space, something like that. It doesn't have an outlook to speak of. The concern about overlooking from above, in the bedrooms above, we've addressed the overlooking from the communal staircase, the stairwell, but it's considered that in this development, because the angles will be quite steep looking down from above, the bedroom on floor 2 above will be at such an acute angle that to achieve looking down, is going to be quite awkward to do that. I'm not sure that that space will be used for anything such as sunbathing, because it doesn't have a direct sunlight. So in terms of the nature of its use and whether it needs to be specifically private, that hasn't been identified as a risk to amenity on that. But I take the member's point on it. But in looking at the layout, it was considered better to give it some kind of ownership than to leave it there to be where pigeons might gather and floating litter accumulate. So this will have an ownership of clean, and if need be, the lower level of the bedroom windows in that bedroom on the floor above at floor 2 could be the lower portion of the window could be obscured, so that from sort of chest height downwards you wouldn't be able to look down straight, but from as you increase above and look down more acutely, you would have an even more awkward view down, so you're less likely to see anything and be able to identify people. Does that answer the member's question, Chair?
Yes, it does, thank you. And I'm not advocating obscure glazing in the bedroom windows. I'm a great fan of obscure windows in rooms like bedrooms. If I just one more question then, looking at the roof layout just above paragraph 17, the two questions really: what is all this stuff on the roof? Is it generating electricity, or what else is it? And what's the reference, please, to the upper roof?
So, Chair, I'll come back again on that. I'm looking at floors 6 and 7. So floor 6 shows photovoltaic panels, solar panels, across the roof surface there, generating electricity, as you might see on a domestic house roof. These will be on a flat roof at an angle, pointing upwards to gather the sun. At this point in time, they may well connect into a battery within the building, and that may well serve the communal areas. It may serve individual flats. As far as I'm aware, it will be able to serve flats. We have a condition on the proposal, which once we get to the building phase, the developer has to submit details of how that will all be configured, as to who will the electricity be shared between the building, depending on number of bedrooms, will that be split that way. The upper floor is, again, it's the top of the lift shaft and the stairwell shaft, so it's floor 7 as such. There is a built form, which is the flat roof, but on top of the lift shaft, the plant room, there will be a further 2 rows of solar panels. That's all that is. It's nothing more mysterious than that, I think, just to explain that. Does that answer the questions on those topics?
Thank you.
Any further questions? Yeah. Opportunity.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. You've repeated something during the presentation, which echoes what's in on page 17, I think that paragraph 4, that says announcements on Google Mapping suggest there was a Redeemed Christian Church of God in that building, and it has ceased to operate. How did you find out about this information? How do you know they've ceased to operate?
Well, we've carried out a site visit about a month ago to double check what was happening there. Churches don't often meet in the week. The activity at the site was quiet. Online, when you research the property, the church itself, it appears to be operating from another premises. So whether it's a group of churches, but then looking back, and what we have in our arsenal is to look at Google reviews. We can look at rates, what's been paid there. It would appear that it had an administrative function related to the church, but the church use itself wasn't within the old commercial use class anyway, so it didn't have a planning permission for use as that. From memory, the last permission it had was going back to the 70s and 80s, where there was a quasi-industrial process going on in the building, with obviously ancillary administration functions. So the buildings had a mixed use there. Most of the buildings in the surroundings have commercial van-based operations, storage, assembly, distribution, and receipt of goods. This one was a bit of an anomaly in that it was perhaps vacant, and parts of it had been used for uses that weren't consented. But we're looking at the building as a provision to provide commercial floor space. So the developer has looked to provide what the market's interested in that area, which was a smaller unit. It's providing, if you look at the layout plans for that particular, I'm just going to go back on my screen because you can't see what I'm looking at here, but just refer back to this. So now the commercial unit would have a lobby area, separate refuse storage, where currently the bins are stored outside. There are cycle space stores for 4 or 5 cycles. It's got kitchenette, WC all on the ground floor. There's also additional plant area for substation, and often these industrial units nowadays with equipment that gets used need augmented electricity to power more powerful machinery. So if that business unit has a more industrial element to it, there'll be that catered for it, but also the substation can cater for the additional residential units on that site. So it's a bit more versatile in its space, a bit more attractive to people who may want to rent a smaller office or small business unit. And it wouldn't preclude the clerical functions of a community church being from operator from that site either. But the building isn't currently authorised to be used as a congregational function.
Okay, I appreciate what you've said concerning the commercial interest and, of course, past approvals or applications that's been on there. But what I'm saying, you've visited this community church during the week, and mostly they congregate on Sundays. Last Sunday, they were still worshiping in this church, just that and I found it misleading to tell us it has ceased to exist. And one other thing is, what do you know what I don't know if it could be part of this, but I know those worshiping there, which I know they still worship there on Sunday, the relationship, the contract between the owners and the person who's the church members, the church users, those who contracted it or who rented it, if they're still in contract with the owners who have asked for this approval.
Chair, we don't have the information.
Can I just ask Stephen to
sorry.
come in on this, please? About authorised use.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, and Frank, please say if there's anything that I'm missing here, but my understanding of what you've said is that the use for admin offices, that kind of thing related to a church or other things would be fine, but the actual use that is referred to in paragraph 4 appears to have ceased. But in any event, that isn't the lawful use of the site. So they didn't actually have they didn't have permission to do that anyway. So the use of the site as a church and a congregation is not a material consideration because it was unauthorised use. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, Chair, that's correct. My understanding that the use, in looking at the planning history, there's nothing on the history of the site giving permission for use as a church or congregational meeting or any kind of religious or community meeting point. But the ancillary office element of it, which is what seemed to be recorded on Google reviews and so on, was not a questionable use, given the business unit has office space within it. But the applicant is there tonight. So if the applicant wishes to perhaps answer the other question the member raised about what's the relationship, do they know? We obviously consulted with the site. We received nothing back from anyone in the community saying that the church meets there, that people want to keep it in that use. It's the first time we're hearing this, so this is somewhat unusual. The developer may be able to answer those questions.
Yeah, I mean, they may have the consent of the owner of the site, but that doesn't mean that they've got planning permission and it's a lawful use.
I get it that they might have no permission for church. That's fine. I want to establish that, which has been established. But just that we know that it's still being used as a church and was used, as you said, that's 2-3 days ago, where they worshipped on Sunday morning and afternoon. I just want the committee to know. Anyway, I'll move to the next question on page 28. It says about Bedfordshire Police objecting. Have they received any updates from them, or that's the final stance on that?
Sorry, Chair, the message was slightly garbled. I missed the part.
The police objection. I think that they objected, didn't they? But I could find it in the report that they.
The crime prevention officer.
It was not a legitimate objection.
The crime prevention officer responded. Often, the crime prevention officer who responds is talking about designing out crime through urban design tricks and solutions for making a building safer. Often, in my experience, whichever authority or police force they will object. It's not an objection. There's not a statutory objection in the sense that they're giving a design advice, and the design advice is that you could keep going until you're blue in the teeth with CCTV gates on all buildings, bars. What we've done is we've tried to achieve a safer building by putting more windows onto the street, so the street is observed and overlooked, to address some of those initial concerns the police officers had on it. We've also got rid of the recesses where the refuse and recycling was, and the entrances to the buildings where people could hide to jump out on people or spring an attack or mug people. So they've all gone, and so now the building at street level is much safer and is less likely to enable that kind of antisocial behaviour from taking place. So we've tried to respond to the police officer comments in respect to design to design out further some of the concerns they had.
Thank you, Chair. I note that one of the conditions is about the affordable housing units. It says that delivery of 3 number 2-bedroom flats identified on plans on floor 1, 2, and 3 as affordable housing units. What percentage does that come up to, and what number of units will that actually translate to?
It's 3 units out of the 15 in total on site, which meets our policy requirement. So in terms of, they're also family-sized units. They're 2 beds. They have the balcony space, and they're on site, which is normally harder to achieve because developers on small schemes wish to provide them off-site as a financial sum contributed to be built elsewhere. So in this case, we've got them on site, 1 per floor, and they are family-sized units. So out of 15, we have the 3 units, which meets our policy requirement. Our policy team are satisfied with the provision.
Okay, so 3 out of 15, so that's roughly around, I would say around about 20%. So yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Thank you. My next question is going to be a question that I always ask, and some of my members will be familiar with what question that is, and that is in relation to the accessibility of these properties and what level of accessibility they're going to be built to.
Thank you. In the presentation, I did touch on this, and you may have missed it, but the 3 affordable housing units proposed on site will be built to accessible design part M4 brackets 2 resident dwelling requirements, with the remainder on the site satisfying the M4 brackets 1 visitable dwelling standards.
No, that's fine. I just find M41, if they do have, say, for example, a disabled person who wants to visit, they can just get through to the front door. So is there no way that they can also build those to the M43 standards and then the M42 to the M43 standards? Is that not possible?
We have asked the question of the developer, and they came back with those figures, Chair. So the developer is here tonight. If you wish to ask them that question, it may be better suited to them because we've already asked that question, and that this is as far as we got with the answer.
That's fine. Thank you, Frank.
Good, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I'm looking at paragraph 57 and we're back on affordable housing. Yeah, it's good with getting the 20%, which is very nice. Paragraph 57 talks about 2 for rent and where are we? And 1 for shared ownership. The council housing team are saying they would prefer they were all affordable rent and transferred to a registered provider, by which I guess they mean a housing association. The final sentence is ambiguous. Section 106 agreement has been proposed to secure this component. Which component, please? 3 rented flats handed over to a housing association, or 2 affordable rent and 1 shared ownership? What does that final sentence mean, please?
Thank you. That final sentence, as you say, ambiguous, is there because the package of Section 106 on offer is more than just the affordable housing. There's a balance for education payments, 129,000, 5,200 for highways, just over 1,000 for cultural services, plus the £10,000 monitoring fee. That is a large sum, and the developer has to weigh that up against the development costs. So the requirement for affordable housing is in that mix, and depending on what offers the best balance when it comes to negotiating the Section 106 is what we have to get down to and finalise. The housing team would prefer them all to be rented. Yes, you're quite right, but things don't always work out in that way. So that is this discussion once members have considered the principle of the proposal and the general parameters of what's being offered. That's the kind of discussion we then have within 3, 4, 5 months as we negotiate the Section 106 agreement. So I can't give you a more definitive answer to that this evening, Chair. Clive's in the room. He may well want to offer something on that, but typically it is a balancing exercise, and it's hard to put exactly what it will transpire as. They have to be transferred to a registered social landlord to qualify as affordable housing. So that will happen. The exact quantum and mix, I can't commit to this evening because that may fluctuate and change. The education figures, if you calculate, they can change on a daily basis. So it's about trying to establish a best package. I'll stop there because I think Clive may have some more on that than I can offer.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. So I think where we've got to would be 2 units as affordable rent and 1 shared ownership would generally be the
policy position that we take. But given what our housing colleagues have asked for in this instance, which is for 3 to be affordable rented, and if it's members' preference that they can direct that and vote on that this evening, that would be, we could then put that into the Section 106 agreement, that it would be 3 affordable rented properties.
Thank you. I'm less clear now than I was before I asked the question. Are we to assume that they've identified a housing association that's willing to take them on, and that they've negotiated an arrangement, financial or whatever, by which the flats will be transferred to a housing association? Or is all of that still a mist in the air waiting to be decided?
Yeah, very much the latter. So if members were minded to grant approval, we would start work on the legal agreement in conjunction with the applicant. They would then get permission, and at that point they would start discussions with a registered social provider or housing association.
They don't reach an agreement with a housing association, does it come back here?
Potentially, there's various different options in the market now. Some developers are setting up their own sort of housing association companies, so they can actually provide the affordable housing within a block and manage it themselves and become a registered social landlord themselves. If the applicant couldn't find someone to take these units on, potentially they would need to come back to us to vary the agreement. They could provide a contribution in lieu if we'd agreed to that as a council, if there were no other options. That has happened at other sites in the past. So there's various options that they could bring forward. But I think the key point is we know there's a real acute affordable need. So if members were so minded this evening, they could direct us to say it should be 3 affordable rented units on site.
Okay, I was quite cheered up when I first realised we'd got 20%, albeit in a relatively small block. But now I'm not so sure. I mean, are we going to get 3 affordable rented, or are we not? I would suggest that we ought to agree as a committee that our preferred option would be for the Section 106 to dictate that they are affordable rented. What we do if they're not able to come to an agreement with a registered social landlord, I haven't got a clue. More advice, please.
If they don't,
please,
sorry, Clive. Go on, Clive. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Yeah, well, that would be for the applicant to work that out and decide on their appropriate course of action, which could be coming back to committee to offer the contribution in lieu, so a significant sum in lieu of getting 3 affordable units on site. I mean, the preference, because we know there's such an affordable housing need, would be to have units on site. And I think housing associations are becoming more receptive to having units within a larger block. We have seen that elsewhere, and I say there are different options in the market now for them to bring that forward. So really, it would be for the applicant to work that out, because they would be party to the legal agreement and they would be signing into that.
Stephen, do you want to come in on this one? You give us a
Yeah,
legal angle.
It's just more information, if you like. So the way the 106 works, the stick that we have within that is they won't be able to occupy a certain number of the market dwellings until the affordable housing has been transferred to a registered provider. So if they cannot find one, that's why they would then need to put in a deed of variation via a Section 106 modification application, which will then be dealt with. Purely in my experience in dealing with our housing colleagues and my experience in dealing with 106s over the years, for Claire Asbury, who you may or may not know, I think we're getting to a point where if they believe there is, it's more likely than not that an RP would not be interested. I think her comments would be more a contribution in lieu rather than insisting, as we are at this moment in time, on no, which is the policy position, affordable housing on site. So I appreciate Clive mentioned the mist, but I think housing would have instructed no contribution in lieu if it was a definite no that an RP would not be interested. Thanks, Jim.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Steve. I don't know what I can say here. The joy here is that it looks like we could end up with 3 affordable rented flats in a mixed development, which is ideal from my point of view, rather than the old-fashioned mass council house developments. On the other hand, leased flats in somebody else's freehold building are not usually attractive to housing associations because they've got very limited control over things like service charges, for example, which they're going to have to pass on to their tenants. So I can see there are obstacles. I guess all we can do is keep our fingers crossed and hope it works.
Francis dear.
Thanks. Can we not insist that it comes to the HRA rather than a housing association?
Yeah. Just still trying to work out the question.
So they become council houses in the council's housing revenue account rather than go to a housing association. Is that possible as a planning condition?
I think it raises issues with the ownership of the building, and because it's within a block of flats. I don't know, Stephen, that's not something that happens on sites of stacked dwellings?
Thank you, Chair. It's unusual that I'm stumped. So thank you.
Sorry about that.
So let me think about this. I don't think we can, because if Claire Asbury were here, which obviously she isn't, it'd be useful. But you know, our policy position is affordable housing. The main mechanism for affordable housing is to be transferred to a registered provider. Registered providers are regulated by, I think it's still Homes England, and all the statutes that govern those creatures as RPs, and you know, rents and what they can eligible households and so on and so forth. So no, I don't think we can insist on anything else, because an RP is the vehicle. Having said that, this is why I'm a bit stumped, and I think Clive mentioned it earlier. There's slightly more flexible vehicles that are coming forward that aren't necessarily RPs, but it's actually the owners or the developers setting up their own companies as RPs. I think, Chair, to some extent, we're getting into a general conversation about affordable housing, which might be beyond what we need in terms of making a decision on this. Well, I'll leave it there if that helps.
We'll be getting to determine what is affordable housing. Any further questions? Oh, David.
Just a final thought on what's been proposed. Certainly from my perspective, having the council take the leases and use them as council flats would, for me, be a last resort rather than a first, because the disadvantage comes with the fact that, of course, they're then subject to the right to buy. Whereas at least with a housing association, they wouldn't be. So, yeah, let's wait and see, I guess, is the only answer.
Any further questions? Actually, Councillor Ambler came in late, didn't he?
Yes, we can't vote.
You can't vote, yeah? You can ask a question.
I think so. I don't think it's a problem.
Yeah, okay, Councillor Ambler.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I welcome this proposal, and this is for the comments. This there was a good, like, and we have some social housing.
Is this a question?
Yeah, no, this is the comments, like to add.
Well, any further questions? And
Oh,
I'll
no,
ask
no.
after comments.
No, no questions.
Are there any further questions? Okay, comments now then.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to see, in future, there will be more, there's some percentage of 3 beds house on the social housing. In this project, I can see there are 2 beds, but as you see, in Luton, we have more, there's a big desperation for 3 beds or 4 beds. So in future, if the planning officer can consider, if there is any allocation for the social housing, if they can highlight it for needs of 3 beds on the social housing, quota. Thank you.
You're on about the mix, the housing mix. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We'll know that. But it seems a reasonable mix to what it used to be a few years ago.
Thank you.
Any further comments? No further comments, then we'll go to the vote, except for Councillor Ambler. You came in late, so you can't vote. Okay. I'll move. They didn't register to speak. Yeah. Okay. I'll move that we approve, subject to the.
Second.
So can I have members voting on if they wish to approve?
Got to do one individually, just so if there's anyone listening online, because they just won't get to people's comments go. So you've got to ask each one individually for or against the recommendation.
Okay. Councillor Ajisola, are you for or against?
Against.
Yes.
Sorry, did you say?
Yes.
Councillor Farouk?
For.
Councillor Franks?
For.
Councillor Alia Khan?
For.
Councillor Raja?
For.
Councillor Steer?
For.
And Councillor Taylor?
4. So that's carried. Permission's planning permission will be granted subject to the conditions. Okay. Right, the next one, which will be 135 Bolton Road, page 54. It's Abby.
Thank you, Chair.
You've been patient.
In terms of an update, the development will not have any adverse impacts on any historic assets within the immediate area. Amended plans have also been received, further clarifying the full and outline elements of the proposal, and condition 5 has been amended accordingly. A number of conditions regarding contamination are recommended to be added to the permission, along with a planning condition regarding biodiversity net gain. All these matters are within the update sheet. The application site comprises a 0.68 hectare site that was previously occupied by 2 substantial commercial buildings that were most recently vacant and redundant. The applicant secured prior approval for the demolition of the 2 existing buildings on the site in February 2024, and they have now been demolished. The site is located within the Manor Road employment area, which is a Category B employment site as identified within the Luton Local Plan. This hybrid planning application seeks full planning permission for a self-store facility and outline planning permission for 178 residential apartments. Subsequently, the development is proposed to be completed over 2 phases, with phase 1 forming the self-store and phase 2 the residential development. The self-store facility is proposed to be located in the northwest of the application site, in a prominent location adjacent to the viaduct. The self-store will extend to 7 stories with the car park below the facility. There will be 5 full-time employees at the self-store, and vehicle and pedestrian access to the building is proposed from Bolton Road. The residential development of the element of the application seeks outline planning permission for 178 flats, with all matters reserved with the exception of the access. Indicative plans have been submitted with the application, which seeks to demonstrate that the housing provision shown can be achieved on the site. The application shows 178 flats over 5 to 14-storey buildings, configured as a mix of 1, 2, 3 and 4-bedroom flats to the east of the site. The residential apartments are a series of individual blocks creating a broken courtyard in the centre. The blocks vary in height from 5 stories to the south, 8 stories to the north and 10 stories facing the A505, raising to 14 stories on the corner of Manor Road and Windmill Road. The indicative plans show a housing mix of 76 one-beds, 88 two-beds, 10 three-bed and 4 four-bed. The flats all meet the nationally described space standards, and private amenity space in the form of balconies, a communal amenity courtyard area and patios are provided. The residential development will be car-free, except the provision of 6 disabled car parking spaces. The communal amenity space will be private for residents only, with no right-of-way provided for the public. A cycle route and pedestrian access will, however, be provided between the self-store building and residential development, where the accessible parking provision is located. The application site is wholly located within a Category B employment area. Subsequently, the development needs to comply with policy LLP 14, which sets out the criteria for redevelopment of employment sites to other uses. On the basis of the fact the LPA have allowed the existing building to be demolished, it is considered that it has been adequately demonstrated that the buildings are no longer fit for purpose. Further to this, it has also been demonstrated that suitable accommodation at comparable rents is available in Luton. The proposal will therefore comply with the criteria within policy LLP 14. Whilst compliant with policy LLP 14, the development must also comply with policy LLP 13. Policy LLP 13 directs warehouse development to strategic employment locations on the edge of Luton. While the proposal is technically for warehousing, it is noted that self-storage facilities do not generate the same number of HGV movements as a large-scale warehousing operation, and furthermore predominantly serve local residents. As such, there's no principal objection to the self-storage use in this location. In regard to policy LLP 15, the proposals are not considered overdevelopment, and the mix of flats is considered to be satisfactory in terms of meeting housing need. The layout of the site is considered well designed, and the self-store located in a prominent location significantly overlooked by people driving on the viaduct. The self-store is considered to be of a good functional design, finished using high quality materials. The height of the self-store building is appropriate for context, with the university buildings on the other side of the viaduct and Power Court development the other side of St Mary's roundabout. The self-store building will be large with one pedestrian entrance, and as such, little interaction with the street scene. However, this is a designated employment area, and the building will aesthetically be a vast improvement on the buildings that were previously on the site and the surrounding historic industrial development. It's also important to recognise that the development will create employment opportunities for local people and furthermore encourage people to visit and use this area, which currently suffers from problems with antisocial behaviour. Whilst a mix of ground floor level uses would have given rise to a more active street scene, it's not recommended given the good quality functional design, regeneration and employment opportunities afforded by development that it should be refused on this basis. The layout of the residential development is considered to be good, with development blocks of varying heights surrounding a green courtyard. Block A will be prominent when viewed from Manor Park, given its height and form as it extends to 14 stories. Whilst it will be prominent, it is not considered to form an intrusive or alien building when considered in light of Power Court and the university buildings. As such, it is not recommended the application is refused on this basis. The detailed design of the residential proposals is not for determination under this outline application. However, it is considered that the application has provided an indicative scheme which is compliant with local plan policies on layout and design. The development will not have an adverse impact on any historic assets, and the indicative plans demonstrate the residential scheme as adequate amenity space with flats that meet nationally described space standards. The proposal will not be to the detriment of any neighbouring occupiers, and no objections have been received from the commercial operators within the existing industrial park. The self-store has underground secure parking and loading space, which will be accessible only for visitors and pedestrian access through a reception area on Bolton Road. The Highways Officer has raised no objection to the proposals and considers the location highly sustainable. A contribution of £62,300 will be provided towards improving sustainable transport links, and this will be particularly directed under St Mary's Roundabout. The developer has submitted a viability assessment, which has been assessed by the council's independent assessor, who agrees with the conclusion of the submitted assessment that is not viable for developer contributions or affordable housing to be provided. Notwithstanding this, the developer has advised they will provide 4 affordable flats to make a contribution to housing need. The council's independent assessor, the independent assessor is also available here at committee today to answer any questions. The development lies adjacent to both an open and culvert section of the River Lee, and the Environment Agency initially had concerns that it would be to the detriment of the culvert. The applicant has, however, carried out a full survey of the culvert, and the EA is now satisfied that the development will not be to the detriment of its integrity. A large number of planning conditions have been requested by the Environment Agency to be added to a planning permission if granted. The development will meet relevant BNG targets and make provision for mitigation of climate change. As members are aware, the council does not have a 5-year housing land supply, and as such, the tilted balance must be applied. The delivery of 178 flats in this instance is considered to carry significant weight in the decision-making process. While the development does not comprise in its entirety family housing, and there are only 4 on-site affordable dwellings, this still given the council's current position regarding housing delivery, will carry significant weight. In the case of this application, it is considered that a mix of employment offer would have resulted in further regeneration benefits rather than one single large self-storage unit. However, given the contribution to housing delivery, improvements to the public realm and sustainable transport offer, regeneration of the area, provision of jobs, improvements to biodiversity and increased natural surveillance resulting in reduced incidents of crime, the public benefits are considered to outweigh the harm demonstrated, and it is recommended that the application is granted planning permission in accordance with the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Abby. Justin Kenworthy, are you present? If you want to go up to this seat that's got applicant agent rather than objector. And you've got up to 5 minutes, and members may wish to ask you questions afterwards. Okay.
Thank you.
So ready when you are.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully not. I won't need 5 minutes. My name is Justin Kenworthy. I'm a planning director at Stantec, a planning and design company. I represent the applicants tonight, Mewburn Properties LLP. One of them is present tonight to answer questions with me. This is Ryan. The applicants are a locally, local family-run business established in 1988 in Luton. The premises on the site became vacant in approximately 2020 and was robustly marketed with no success until its demolition in 2024, as Abby's explained. The land is now being used as a temporary car park for people travelling through Luton Airport. So at the moment, the site is an unattractive plot of land at the gateway into Luton's town centre and adds nothing in terms of contribution to the local economy, nor to the local community, and detracts from the area. The Luton self-storage market is currently undersubscribed, and the key facts are as follows. Luton itself provides an equivalent of 0.45 square feet per head of population, 0.45. The national average is 0.82. Dunstable 1.19 and Stevenage 3.3 square feet per head of population. So you can see that Luton's provision for self-store is half of the national average and falls well short of surrounding areas. So there is a high need for this. And the proposed facilities, therefore, will meet the needs of the local town's businesses and for its residents. And of course, it will be managed by Mewburn Properties themselves, who are a local business. The proposed flats, 178 of which will contribute significantly to the council's 5-year housing land supply. And as Abby has explained, this is in high need, and the tilted balance is in play here in favour of supporting the mixed-use proposals, which are designed to reflect the gateway location it's located in. And we've undertaken extensive discussions with the council's planning and design teams, and we're very happy with the results that we've come to. We note there are no objectors that have been raised at all to the application, and we don't have anybody speaking tonight, which is perhaps a sign of the fact that there is support out there for the proposals. The applicant is committed to delivering the scheme, phase 1 being the self-store, and in the current market conditions, that's a good achievement, particularly with the eye-watering build costs that are out there at the moment. But the applicants are committed to delivering the benefits of the scheme. Abby, I think, has referred to some of them in her speech, but clearly meeting the needs for self-store facilities, meeting the needs for new homes, utilising this previously developed land, thereby safeguarding, I suppose, greenbelt land or greenfield land. There will be additional permanent and temporary jobs for the local labour market, and the provision of social rent family homes, better permeability across the site, high quality landscaping around all of the boundaries, which currently does not exist, and therefore resulting in street scene improvements. 49.5% biodiversity net gain when the requirement is only 10%. Enhanced overlooking of St Mary's Roundabout Gardens and Manor Park, thereby improving the local security in the area, clearly paying the £62,000 for highways improvements. And of course, then you have the trickle-down benefits resulting from the new residents' spend in the local area, the business rates and the council tax revenue that the scheme will generate. Abby's mentioned that the scheme has been robustly tested by the council's affordable housing consultant, and the clawback mechanism is in the Section 106 agreement to maximise the amount of affordable housing, should that be available after the reserve matters application have been submitted and approved by the council, which will be further down the line. So there's an opportunity, as I say, to claw back if there's an improvement in the viability situation. So this proposal squarely meets the objectives of Luton Town's local plan, the town centre master plan framework, and of course the NPPF. And we hope members support your officer's strong recommendation this evening. And thank you to officers for their hard work today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions to the agent? You seem to have quietened everyone down. Okay, questions to the planning officer, Abby? Anyone?
I think it's more the heat.
Councillor Ambler, yeah. Yeah, it could be the heat. But,
Thank you, Chair. As far as I understand, on the point number 2, section number 3, just only 4 affordable houses out of 178. It is because of this, is there, because if we have reviewed, I'm not sure whether it will reflect policy LLP 16, the percentage of affordable houses. Did you manage to look this, why we accept very low number of percentage for affordable housing out of 178?
Yeah, I mean, that's correct. It's lower than the 20%. We do, what happened was a viability assessment was submitted by a developer, which was then assessed by an independent assessor. The independent assessor, James Purvis, is here today. If you would like him to answer any questions on that matter about the conclusions that he came to following the submission of the assessment. Yeah?
Yes.
James, I don't know if you can help with this.
Yeah, hi there, evening. I'm Jamie Purvis from BNP Paribas Real Estate. And I mean, in relation to the 4 social rented units that have been offered by the applicant, technically the scheme is unviable on a current day basis to the tune of about £1.8 million, with the 4 social rented units included within the appraisal. So technically, the provision of those units is unviable, but by way of context, in order to explain where the conclusions have come from, insofar that the scheme obviously cannot support more than 4 social rented units, is that viability in the residential development sector has been adversely affected by a steep increase in construction costs over recent years and falling demand from prospective purchasers due to a significant increase in mortgage rates, and also the loss of Help to Buy for first-time buyers has currently had an adverse effect on the market. To put this into context, in Luton, from January 2020, average market housing sales values have increased by circa 19% up until Q2 2025, whilst construction costs have increased over the same period by circa 18.5%. So the increase in sales values and construction costs have increased pretty much in tandem. And it's the differential between the sales values and the construction costs from which planning obligations, including affordable housing, has secured, has become narrower. So generally, in order for schemes to secure a greater percentage of affordable housing, market housing revenue needs to outstrip construction cost inflation. Furthermore, higher market housing sales values are required in order to cross-fund affordable housing. As context for this viability assessment, for example, the revenue generated by the market housing units is circa £44 million, yet the construction costs, the base construction costs for the market housing units, including a 5% construction cost contingency, is circa £38 million, so a difference of £6 million. And that's before we add into the appraisal fees for professional fees, including architects, structural engineers, etc., as well as marketing costs, sales agent fees, finance costs, and of course, developer profit. So on the basis of current day values, the blended capital value per square foot is £388. But in order to generate a significant surplus towards affordable housing of between £2.5 to £5 million, sales values would need to increase by in the region of between 10% to 20%. However, such values are not currently supportable in the current market. However, the council does have the opportunity in the future at an agreed point in time to have, for want of a better expression, the second bite of the cherry in terms of viability, as a review mechanism will be implemented within the Section 106, which will allow for the viability of the scheme to be reconsidered at an agreed point in the future. And hopefully by then, construction cost inflation would reduce considerably, and Luton would benefit from revenue growth in terms of market housing sales values, which will generate a significant differential between the two, which can then support additional on-site or off-site affordable housing.
Thank you, that was useful.
Questions to the officers?
Yes, to the planning officer, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I understand all the criteria you've just given us. But when you look at don't know whether you had the benefit of being able to hear the previous application, the amount of affordable housing in that application compared to this just doesn't seem to square. I don't know whether you want to comment. I mean, I appreciate everything you've just put in your argument, but how can one applicant do it and another can't?
I think maybe it was the commercial element on the previous application, because they're hoping to get higher rents.
But there's a commercial element on this application.
Do we let the applicant answer the question? Yeah. Either.
Oh, yes. I mean, obviously we did know about the other application on the agenda, but we can only look in terms of the policies before us of how we make an assessment of an application. So with the initial application that was submitted, that was item number 7, there wasn't a viability assessment submitted with that application. It was a effectively commercial decision, based on the applicant's decision not to submit a assessment, and we don't know the ins and outs of the reasoning for why that site can provide the contributions. Obviously we know that it's been put forward, but we don't know the price of the site. We don't know anything to that nature. However, for the 1 to 35 Bolton Road, we have provided with that application, and the NPPF requires us to make an assessment of that application. We've used the independent assessor. We've rigorously tested the information that's been submitted and come to the conclusion that the site isn't viable if it provides the affordable housing and the contributions. Obviously, the developer has put forward over and above what the viability assessment said to put in some affordable units, 4 of which, and I have to note as well, obviously this is an indicative scheme, but these affordable units are proposed to be ground level, family size, self-contained social rent units that have their own front doors and gardens, and the developer has obviously researched the fact that they consider this would be attractive to an RP potentially. So equally, I think as you said, there are differences between these applications, and we have to assess what's before us. And clearly, if we'd had a viability statement submitted on the other application, we would have followed the processes as we're required to for that application as well. Hopefully that answers your question. Thank you.
Yes, if that's okay, Chair. Just to reinforce what Abby said, and 20% delivery on the previous scheme. I've not seen a viability. I can't tell you if it's correct or not, but that's a considerable impact on the developer's profit. Presumably the developer has agreed to either no profit or to make a loss, because that's considerable. But just to give you an idea of what's happened in the past, which have been subject to viability: Flowers Way, 0% affordable; Castle Street, 0% affordable; Cumberland Street, 2.85% affordable; Honda Cumberland Street, 0% affordable; Dunstable Road, 0% affordable; our scheme, 2.25% affordable; The Stage, 0% affordable; Guildford Street, 0% affordable. So that's the pattern, because they're based on viability assessments. That's 2 Gloucester Road, no viability. Is it deliverable? Question mark.
Well, I was kind of criticising myself for comparing 2 different applications that have come before us tonight. But I think that is a bit outrageous, because you're comparing applications that were made over a whole period of time. And I really don't think you can do that. Also, you've got a commercial aspect to this development, which is the self-storage. That doesn't seem to have come into the assessment. You're only comparing what the housing element of it, and not the self-storage and what that will bring in.
Chair, do you want me to answer? The viability assessment has assessed everything on the proposal, as opposed to just the residential on its own routes.
That includes the self-storage as part of the assessment.
We didn't hear any reference to the self-storage, to be fair.
Well, it's in the report, and it was. Well, it must have taken.
It is what it is. I'm just.
It must have taken into account.
Yeah. Okay. That's fine.
Okay, Councillor Amlia.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just referring you like in previous comments. You made a comparison. I'm not sure whether you were aware.
This is the planning officer.
Yeah, so I'm not sure whether you were aware. We had a local plan has updated last year. So what this gentleman he referred, those approval was done before 2024 because last year we have updated our local policy, and all this planning permission should be reflect in terms of latest local plan what we agreed, and you can see. Yes, so what we agreed, so what is 2.5% out of 20% affordable, even it doesn't match even quarter the requirement. So I would like to request you to review or revisit. Thank you.
Do you want me to pick this one up, Abby? Yeah, so what we've done is the local plan review. So we've reviewed the currently adopted local plan, which we've, on the basis of that review, decided that we do need to do a new local plan. So, but we're only very much starting out on the process of producing the new local plan. So we're currently this summer going through a lot of the evidence gathering for the new local plan. But it's going to be a little way off before that's adopted. We need to go out to consultation, go through the relevant democratic processes. And it's going to be, towards the end of 27 potentially before the new local plan is adopted. So we're making this decision under the currently adopted local plans, and that's all set out in detail in the committee report.
Okay. Yes. David, thanks.
Mind a comment, Chair. Are you ready for that? Or
any further questions? Comments? Away you go.
Thank you. Okay, where do we start? I think the first thing I have to say is for an outline application, I've got no problem with the self-storage thing. That's no problem with that at all. Looking at the housing element, for an outline application, it does include a remarkable amount of detail, I have to say. So much detail, in fact, that contrasting with the previous item on the agenda, a much smaller development, 20% affordable housing, we're now asked to approve this application, which is almost 10 times the size, with 2% affordable housing. I really am fed up of hearing developers talking about their terrible problem with increasing construction costs. I'm in serious danger of my tears staining my T-shirt when I worry about it. What they never talk about, of course, is the fact that the houses and flats that they're going to sell are also going to be at much higher prices, because not only is construction costs rising, so is the price of housing. I think in the end, unless someone is going to come up with a magic formula that will change my mind, then I'm certainly going to vote against this application.
Any further comments? There being no further comments, so we'll move on to the recommendation. And despite the fact of the lack of affordable social housing, the option is that if it's refused, you don't get the housing that we desperately need. Francis?
Sorry, can we send it back for more negotiations between the officers and the developers?
I don't understand what those negotiations would be.
No, through you, Chair. I think we have negotiated quite hard, and actually we've arrived at a position where we've got 4 affordable units where the developer didn't need to provide them in terms of the viability position. I mean, we're in a very difficult position as a council, because viability has to be taken into account in decision making. And we've tried to refuse applications before, Midland Road being a case in point, and we ended up losing. So yeah, we went through the whole process. The application was refused, and we did robustly defend that at the appeal hearing. I think you came along, Dave, as well. So, and we really put the case, but unfortunately it is government policy that viability is taken into account in our decision-making process. To give you some comfort though, the viability appraisal submitted at the moment is based on assumptions. When, if the scheme is built out, the viability review will be based on actual facts and costs, and potentially it opens the door for us to capture more. So it's not, you know, it's not an ideal position, but until the government changes the policy about viability review, unfortunately, we do have to take it into account.
Yeah, that's fine, thanks.
Yeah,
sorry, I'm new to the planning
Yeah,
process.
I can name you.
I better ask.
I can name you several sites that have
Yeah.
been developed. Got planning permission, which
Understand.
Cumberland Street, Flowers Way, which is a bit hit and miss. They do some work for a week and then have a few weeks off.
Can I come?
Yeah, okay, just Stephen.
Yeah, just quickly, thank you, Chair. I think the other thing you need to take into account, which is, I believe, different from the Flower Way and Midland Road examples, is now the tilted balance as well. And that is a material consideration, which wasn't the case in the Flowers Way and Midland Road cases. I'm seeing nods, for example. So that is another material consideration in favour of granting that tilted balance, as the planning officer mentioned, is basically we have less than a 5-year housing supply. So anything that can go towards housing is given greater weight, and that's what's referred to as a tilted balance. Thank you, Chair.
Mention your favourite overedge clause, have you, tonight?
Clive did, and
you did.
Stop a thunder.
I must have been listening.
Yeah, viability
That-
review, overage. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, when they actually come up for sale, then they can do the viability study again, or some kind of viability study again. Are there any further comments? Then the recommendation is to approve, subject to the conditions. I so move.
I second.
Angela, you've had one practice at the vote. Do you want you see if you can get it right this time?
Okay. So Councillor Ajisola, do you agree with the recommendations in the report?
4.
Councillor Ambia,
Against.
Councillor Franks,
Again,
Councillor Alia Khan,
For.
Councillor Raja,
For.
Councillor Steer
4.
and Councillor Taylor.
4. And then that's 5-5-2, so that's carried. Planning permission has been granted, subject to the conditions. Okay, that being the extent of the business tonight. Thank you very much. Coming, well, those of you who did turn up, and see you.